We're going to be talking about mentoring, and I was trying to. I was surprised that when I went to try to put stuff down on paper, that it's kind of hard teaching about mentoring, depending on the perspective. So you're obviously someone who's wanting and needing mentoring in your life, um, but it's not really. There's not really a way to teach that, like teach you how to get a mentor. That's all kind of artificial and stuff. So I had to come at it from kind of what it means to be a mentor. Let me just say it this way. I think that the focus of your life in the near term is to receive mentoring, but in due time, as you mature in ministry and in life, it's to become a mentor. It's really mentoring is high level discipleship. When we talk about being a disciple, we're talking about a fully functioning follower of Christ who then goes out and helps to create through their witness and their life and their teaching other fully functioning followers of Christ. And so when we get into mentoring, that's really what we're doing. It's really more in a higher sense for ministry, for calling, for life fulfillment, vocation. And so I'm coming at this really more from the perspective of the mentor. But I hope that what you'll do is be perceptive enough to realize that what I'm talking about in being a mentor are the things you should be looking for someone in mentoring your relationship in your life. And I have some examples from my own life at the very end that will give you kind of an encouragement of a good mentor and a bad mentor. Okay. Because bad mentors become tormentors. True.
That's good. That's good.
Okay. So we pray. Father, thank you this morning for this group of students. Thank you for, Lord, just their open heart to receive. And Lord, today I pray that for each one, you will bring authentic mentors into their life. We all need one, Lord, regardless of where we're at the journey. And Lord, I pray that you would send that person. They would only receive into their heart and life the people that are sent by you. Because Lord, we know in that there's trust. We know that in that there's blessing. We know that in those relationships there's growth. And so, Lord, protect them from those that would speak into their life and bring harm or confusion to them. And God will thank you and praise you for it in Jesus' name. Amen.
We'll it's turkier.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just have a service heart here, you know.
Jesus.
I'm gonna fill out.
So let me just make a few brief comments. We'll get into the teaching. Guys, you're basically going to be the average of the six closest people, 5 or 6 closest people you allow into your life. So let's say that you have people in your life that's close to you, and one on a scale from 1 to 10, one's a 3. And when we talk about 3, I'm not talking about smart or qualified. Maybe their spirituality. Their spirituality is 3 on a scale from 1 to 10. And you got a 3, and you've got a 7, and you've got an 8, and you've got a 2, and you've got a well, let's start up there. That's about an average of 5. Okay, so you're never going to be much beyond that. And let me say this about yourself: all of you have a certain aptitude for a vocation, and that's even true in ministry. So your natural disposition of how God created you and wired you, you rate somewhere on the scale from 1 to 10. Okay, so let's be hard on ourselves. Let's say that we're a 4 on a scale from 1 to 10, just with our natural giftings. Through a mentor, you can move upwards 2 deviation points. So a 4 likely is never going to become a 10. Okay, and that may not be God's intention for you. There may be something that a 4 uniquely serves. We look at it as like we're not smart enough, we're not this or that. No, God knows the way He's made us, but we always want to improve upon who we are. And so I believe that with the proper mentor, you can move up a couple of deviation points to become the best version of yourself. Okay. So mentoring is a big deal. So throughout the Bible, it's evident that God does not want us to grow in isolation. In fact, there is no growth in isolation. The development of our calling is primarily found in community and in accountable relationships. If you begin to look at the scripture from the beginning, his design has been for his people to walk together, to learn from one another, to pass on the torch from one generation to another. Here's the weird stage of life that I'm in. All of my life, I've been on the receiving end of the mentoring. And now I've got to a stage in life where I'm having to pass on the mentoring. And it's weird. It makes me feel old. It makes me realize that in my life, there's a sunset. There's a sunset to ministry. There's a sunset to influence. There's a sunset to these things. And so when I begin to move in this latter stages, I got to begin to look around for people that I can begin to pour into to pass that torch on. And I think this is most powerfully seen through mentoring within the context of Christian ministry. For the leader in God's service, the call is not merely to lead, but also to raise up others who will carry the work forward. Here's the key point: with greater power and effectiveness. And we'll say this a few times. Any mentor in your life that doesn't want them to do better than you, they're not a mentor. Mm-hmm. If they always want to be the one who remains superior to you, they're not a mentor. Mentors want to push you above and beyond them. That way they take whatever they've learned and whatever they've experienced to deposit into you so that you can go further down the road than they can. The Bible provides us with some practical examples. We're going to look at 3 today. We're going to look at Elijah and Elisha. We're going to look at Aquila and Priscilla and Apollos. And we're going to look at Barnabas and John Mark. Okay? So the first one is Elijah and Elisha. Write this down: mentoring that brings impartation. Mentoring that brings impartation. We find their story in 1st and 2nd Kings, and it's really one of the most iconic mentoring relationships we see in the whole Bible. There's a drama to it. It's a powerful narrative of how this experience, but really where a prophet is wearing down, is preparing his successor for a ministry that would surpass his own. And as you begin to look at the relationship between Elijah and Elisha, they didn't have a casual friendship, but it was purposeful. At times tested. I think it was really based in covenant with one another. Typically, when we use covenant language in relationships, we're primarily talking about a marriage relationship. That's outside of your covenant with God. That's the next covenant, the most important covenant that you enter into. But I also want to say to you that you need to have friendships that are covenant love, not equal to marriage. Please don't get okay. But it goes beyond a best friend. It's something where you have this bonded relationship, like Jonathan and David had a relationship of having one another's back, being willing to die for one another, to confide in one another, to really stand shoulder to shoulder together. And that's kind of the relationship Elijah and Elisha had. And through this relationship, we see this dramatic transfer of spiritual authority. I want you to write this down. The foundation of the relationship was built on 2 things: proximity and service. Proximity and service. When God first called Elisha, he was plowing the field. And Elijah comes out and he throws his mantle on him. Okay, that would be the dramatic moment, the tada moment later on when Elijah would be taken into heaven. But he finds him out there playing the field. He's out there just working a job, and he throws his mantle over him. And it's a symbolic act that marked Elisha for a new vocation. So when that happened, Elisha became Elijah's servant, his protege. He became the mentee. Elijah was the mentor. And this role that we see here is not just menial labor. One of the big things that we build the ministry school on here is that we don't want you just stacking chairs all the time or cleaning up after a mess. Yes, you will have to do that in ministry. Okay. Yes, you need to do some of that here, but we're not here to have you for slave labor. We're here for you to learn meaningful things. We don't want to burden you with menial things. However, God does use the menial to build character in us. But that we see that from the very beginning in this mentoring relationship, Elijah just didn't have him there as like some butler or hired servant or slave. He regarded him. He was really giving him this kind of apprenticeship kind of thing. Scholars suggest that Elisha spent approximately 6 years learning from Elijah. 6 years. And while he was doing that, he was serving him. He was observing what he did. It was really kind of a time of deep discipleship. Again, mentoring for those who got here a little late. This is really discipleship on a higher level. It's high level discipleship. So Elijah watches how Elijah prays, how he confronted kings, how he trusted God in the wilderness, how he wrestled with God with doubt and moments of despair. Everything was in full view. I think that for mentorship to be effective, and if you have a mentor in their life, they have to give you a perspective of what they walk through and go through. If they are the holy, perfect man or woman of God who never stumbles, never fails, never has weakness in their life, they're just feeding you a line of phony baloney. Okay. And not that they're there to give you their deepest, darkest secrets, but you need to see the roller coaster of their life and still respect them because they go through things just like you. They get some mornings they don't feel like studying or going to work or preaching on Sunday. There's times that you go through it, and you need to be able to see those things in them, but to see how they respond to them, how they overcome those things. And Elijah allowed Elisha to see those things in him. But this constant proximity allowed Elisha to internalize not only Elijah's methods, but really his very spirit and heart for God. And I'm coming to a key principle, which you get ready to write down. Key principle for us is allowing potential mentors into the inner circle of our life. But let me say this, be very careful who you allow into the inner circle of your life. Be careful what you share. Be careful who you trust. Be careful to know that the person that you're being mentored by is trustworthy. They are discreet. They're not people who are going to just expose things about you to the world, to people who have no business in knowing these things. Leadership cannot be taught solely from a distance through abstract principles. Here's the thing I really want you to write down. It must be caught as much as it's taught. Okay, so in my personal life, and you could probably have conversations with the staff guys about this, but I've always believed that proximity is the best teacher. I have never, and I do not now want to ever be pursued as a guru or an expert. That's unhealthy. It's unhealthy for me to feel that way about myself. It's unhealthy for others to regard me that way. But I've always wanted to expose the pastors that served with me to let them be involved in major decisions, to have a front row seat to major projects, to help work through major disasters. For example, when I was in Georgia and pastoring there, we were going through a building program, and I made the guys come on the job site and walk with me and be a part of those conversations. And some of them thought, why am I doing this? Because I believe that one day, through my influence in their life, they're going to exceed me. They're going to be senior leaders on their own. They're going to build something one day, and they're going to remember something that was exposed to them by just being in proximity to the process and allowing me to have a passenger seat to see all the things we're going through. So a lot of times, like when things come up here at the church, in our executive team meetings, which will happen at 10:30, we kind of walk through, what should we do about this decision? I'll let everybody kind of weigh in, and then I will kind of give them what I think the final decision is. And a lot of times my final decision is influenced by what I'm hearing from them. But then after I give the decision, I want to explain to them why I'm taking this decision. And there's been many times in which we disagree. And then I have to be accountable to them, to maybe go back and say, you were right and I was wrong. But here's the reason why I made that decision. That's proximity. That's getting an idea. That's seeing behind the curtain to see exactly how life and ministry works. But my belief has always been that if leaders walk together in proximity, there's the ability for knowledge and wisdom to flow through transparent relationships and open access in leadership moments. We know that Elisha requested for a double portion of Elijah's spirit. He was someone who wanted to grow. He had some amount of drive to him. Listen, it will be very hard for you to ever find a mentor in your life if you don't have drive.
Yeah.
Because a mentor does not want to waste their time with you when you blow them off.
Yeah.
So a mentor says, hey, I'd like to meet you for coffee, or I'd like for you to serve with me in an area, and you don't show up. You're not worthy of their time. Because again, they're trying to take a portion of themselves and give it to you. And they're giving you a portion of their authority. They're giving you insight into their life. They're taking time away that they can spend in doing other things, maybe with family or friends, or just in their personal rest and relaxation. And so they want to know that you have a drive, that you're wanting to go somewhere. It's very important that they see that in you. The pinnacle of the journey between Elijah and Elisha is this deep lesson in faithful presence and spiritual inheritance. Faithful presence and spiritual inheritance. Elijah was about to be taken up to heaven, and he repeatedly told Elisha to stay behind. But if you notice this, you'll find this in 2 Kings chapter 2. Elisha had this unwavering commitment to him, and he refused to leave his side. I'm going to be with you. So you go to heaven, I'm going to be with you. And so I want you to think you're the one being mentored, and all of a sudden this chariot comes to take your mentor away. And what would you feel in that moment? It had to be a mix of emotions. It had to be bittersweet. Here's this guy's been pouring into my life for 6 years. Now God takes him. And in this front row seat, it's kind of like he's grieving. He has to be grieving like it's being taken away. And at the same time, there's this moment where he's seen the glory of God revealed. Imagine Jesus with his disciples, Acts chapter 1. And he's been with them 3.5 years. He's deposited in them. He said, I'm going to die and I'm going to be resurrected. And sure enough, he appears to the wall, walks with them for 4 days. And in 4 days, he says, I've got to go to heaven. And he ascends up into heaven with angels flanking him on either side. What were the disciples feeling at that moment? I'm sure it was, wow, my mentor is leaving, but now responsibility is falling on me. And that's pretty awesome to realize that now, whatever the process has been, God is now shifting the authority and the spirit and the presence of that person into your life. As I sit before you this morning, I am the accumulation of a lot of relationships and a lot of fingerprints of people in my life that I've walked with. Some for good, some for bad, but it's all been for my good. And now, after you serve a while, you begin to realize now, after all these people have poured into you, again, you got to begin to look behind you and say, who am I going to begin to mentor? I'll tell you a story about a friend. I have this friend, and he was noticing how that I was having some older, successful guys speaking in my life, and were giving me access into theirs. And we're on the phone today, and he's griping, and he's saying, like, man, why can't I ever find a mentor? Man, why it's always you get. And I said, well, I prayed for one, number one, but number two, I said, who are you mentoring? I said, because if you begin to look for people to mentor, I think God will bring a mentor into your life. That's what He did for me. We're always trying to look around and to lift people up. So if you're ever in that moment where you're saying, I'm needing to be around a leader by which I have this proximity, where because of this relationship, God's going to give me some spiritual inheritance. There's something that I don't want to get mystical here. Don't get weird, okay? Look at me, don't get weird. So I'm not going to get weird. But you want to be around people where a piece of them, piece of their spirit, their presence kind of gets in you. Literally, when you kind of get further down the road, this is almost like spiritual fatherhood, that you start hearing their voice in yours. You start seeing their personality in you. I'll talk more about that later. So here's a second one here. Is Priscilla, Aquila, and Apollos mentoring through correction. So the first is mentoring through impartation. The second one's mentoring through correction. This Elijah model is probably the most intense example of mentoring because of all the drama and the mantle and the double portion, all that stuff, the miracles. But in the New Testament, we see a different paradigm, and it's through the story of this married couple, Priscilla and Aquila, and this young guy, Apollos. And we find this in Acts chapter 18, verses 24 to 28. And we see that there's this mentoring relationship that's very collaborative, but it's also very corrective. And sometimes correction hurts, but it can be very empowering if you'll have the right spirit. And so we find this very seasoned, mature, older couple who takes on this very gifted and talented young minister. As young ministers, let me say this to you, that God will bring mentors in your life to bring correction to you, because all of us at some point in time in our journey, our gifts and abilities will begin to outrun our character development and our spiritual development. See, one of the most dangerous things that can happen to you is to be a really gifted person with natural gifts and then not develop or excel in your spiritual and character development at the same speed as you're developing your professional skills. So again, there's a lot of people that can speak great out there. We've seen presidents, we've seen leaders, we've seen influential people in society, influencers, but they didn't have any character development. We see it in the ministry too. And so what I'm saying is that because those gaps emerge in our life as we're developing professionally and spiritually, we're trying to keep them all on track, these gaps develop, and that's when God brings a mentor in our life that becomes a corrective mentor. And you cannot perceive them as a threat. You have to embrace them as a blessing. But we see them as a threat because none of us like to be told what to do. None of us want someone to say, hey, get with it. This isn't cool. You can do better. Apollos, he was an impressive guy. Acts 18, 24 and 25 says this. He was an eloquent man, competent in the scriptures, who spoke and taught accurately the things concerning Jesus. So he was, I'll give you a second here. Document just left me. So here's this guy. He really has a lot on the ball. He's someone that wows the crowd. He's got a silver tongue. And though he's very gifted in post, especially debate, he would refute the Jews. He would debate them. But there was this gap in him, in his knowledge base. He only knew about the baptism of John. Do you understand what that means? John the Baptist, he was the forerunner of Jesus. He came preaching repentance and was baptizing people to repentance. But then he, though being Jesus' cousin, then becomes the forerunner, the herald for Jesus, and points to him. At one point says, behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world, while he's baptizing people in the Jordan. Then Jesus goes into the water to receive the baptism of John. And when he does, then there is a voice from heaven, this is my son in whom I'm well pleased, and done descends from heaven and rests upon him. We see there the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit in that moment, one of the most graphic illustrations of the Trinity in that moment. So John was this very influential figure, and basically Apollos was a convert of John. And he was believing Jesus, but he didn't have a full understanding of Jesus. Aquila and Priscilla had that kind of understanding. They were the ones that had filled in that gap for him. So this is where they entered his life. They were believers that had a lot of ministry experience. They served with Paul as co-workers in Corinth. In Acts, we see this Acts 18, verse 11. But they see this huge potential in Apollos, excuse me. But they also saw his theological shortcut. Let me say this about me and every one of us in this room. All of us have some shortcut. All of us have something that really trips us up, something that we're blind to, many times willfully blind to. And we have to have somebody to come in from outside of our lives say, hey, man, you really need to grow here. And that's what's happening. So they didn't publicly shame him. They didn't embarrass him. They didn't dismiss his gifts. Acts 18:26, it says they took him aside, so away from the public, and explained to him the way of God more accurately. This interaction highlights, I think, some crucial stuff we got to consider. First, we got to see the importance of discernment. A good mentor in your life must be able to see beyond your current limitations, see your potential. Priscilla and Aquila didn't see a heretic. Okay, they could have said, false teacher. He's only preaching the gospel of John, or the message of John. Let's just grab a stone and take him out. But they saw this guy who had gifts and a fire that was burning inside, who just needed to be directed to greater truth. So there's going to be discernment. Then they model, number two, the art of godly correction. There is an art to correction. You have an art to correction when you can tell somebody exactly the way it is, and it may sting, but they'll almost thank you for it. They're like, man, that really stunk that I had to sit there and listen to that. But I think they're right, and I think that they really care about me. That's the art of godly correction. So notice their approach was private, it was personal, it was collaborative. They create a safe space for learning. They didn't try to create a platform for judgment. And it's really a contrast to the combative and prideful spirit that can sometimes infect theological debates within the church. True mentorship seeks to build up, not tear down. Now, I love the fact that you guys are becoming theological nerds. No, seriously, I'm complimenting you. That's a great thing. But theological nerds oftentimes will begin to drift really hard and strong toward apologetics. Okay, this defense of the faith, and they almost have a combative spirit. They become this warrior, this zealot for the truth. And they begin to love truth more than the one who is truth. And they love to argue. Why do you think crossfires are so popular, guys? We know this. We know this. And we love that because that helps to develop that in you. But you've got to be that articulate crossfire, go for the juggler kind of person in your knowledge base, but your heart has to remain tender. It has to remain soft. It has to remain in the best interest of others, to really, when you go to correct them, that they have a sense and a feel that God has sent you into their life, or a mentor has entered into your life to help you grow and become more than just someone who has a lot of knowledge, who can really articulate faith, but can do it in a pastoral spirit. So beyond these principles, this story demonstrates how the gifts of the Spirit works within the body of Christ. So Priscilla and Aquila, their husband and wife, they use their combined wisdom and experience to serve a younger brother in the faith. And here's something I find interesting, back to women in ministry. The fact that Priscilla is often named first in biblical texts instead of Aquila kind of gives us an insight that she had a prominent role. It's challenging prejudices about gender roles in ministry and highlights that the Spirit gives and calls whom He wills. So it's one of those things where we see that God is working through all of us in this process. But their mentorship was not about creating a clone of themselves, but about equipping Apollos to be the best version of himself for God's purposes. If you have a mentor in your life, they're trying to make you exactly like them, run. Dress like me, talk like me, think like me, regurgitate what I say. That's control. That could be grooming. You understand grooming? Okay. Grooming, it goes beyond the sexual connotation that's very prevalent in society right now. Grooming could be any type of emotional takeover in your life that serves some purpose for the person who's trying to cast influence in your life. And you got to be careful, because those people do exist in the ministry too. The result of this investment was supernatural. Once Apollos had a more complete understanding, we find that he went to Achaia, which is near Corinth, and greatly helped those. This is verse 27-28, Acts 18. Greatly helped those who through grace had believed, for he powerfully refuted the Jews in public, showing by the scriptures that Christ was Jesus. So we see that their mentoring transformed this guy who was he's pumped up, he's on fire, but he was an incomplete guy, into a leading defender of the faith. So for the modern leader, for all of us in this room, it's a reminder that our role is to refine, not to rebuild from scratch. So, for us here, we're not trying to deconstruct you here. We're trying to take who you are, the way God created you, and refine those aspects of you that He is calling out. We're not here to try to make you clones of us. Your ministry, I hope, will be greatly influenced by Cellular First in the future, but it should not be a copy of it. It needs to have your personal touch and your personal expression. We have to be willing to begin to. Sorry, the computer. I'm learning. Sorry. I hit the home button. I don't know where I was at here. I'm sorry. So, well, we just got to be able to lend ourselves to processes where the passion and the fire and the zeal that we have for God is channeled in the right direction. And to realize that people are not trying to hold you back, they're trying to keep you from self-destructing. Because you can be so on fire that you spontaneously combust. And I've seen it. I've seen guys that are men and women who've been so fired up that no one could speak to them, no one could teach them. They thought they knew everything. They had an inside track to God, a personal revelation from God, and no one could challenge that. And then they got into this echo chamber of their own voice, called it the Spirit's voice, and went and did some really dumb, stupid things. Don't do that. Third example here, Barnabas and John Mark mentoring through restoration. The mentoring through impartation, through correction, and now mentoring through restoration. This is probably one of the softer ones, one of the more encouraging aspects of mentoring that we see in the Bible. This relationship with Barnabas and John Mark was really kind of a picture of grace and patience and believing in someone, not giving up on someone when they failed. John Mark, his story begins with a setback. He got out of the gate kind of on the wrong foot. This is Acts chapter 13. He's on the first missionary journey with Paul and Barnabas. And the Bible says that he left them and returned to Jerusalem, Acts 13:13. And we don't really know exactly what was going on. We think it was a mama's boy, probably. That he was missing home. Maybe he was overwhelmed. Maybe he disagreed with the strategy. But it seems it was more of a personal thing. It just seems like he really wasn't mature enough in that moment to step onto that platform. He really wasn't that moment ready to travel the Mediterranean world and go all these places. He just wasn't there yet. But what we do see that's very clear is that the result was a failure to complete the mission. And beyond that, it creates this major rift, a tearing in the relationship between Barnabas and Paul. They're disagreeing over him. They're like, well, no, this guy, he's a deal breaker. I don't like the way this went down. So we see that in the second missionary journey, Paul refuses to take Mark along, considering him unreliable, Acts 15:38. But we see that Barnabas steps in. His name, the name Barnabas literally means son of encouragement in the original language, son of encouragement. And in verse 37, he says he wanted to take John with him, and he was willing to give his cousin, they were related, a second chance. The disagreement was so sharp that Paul and Barnabas parted ways, but Barnabas, in an extraordinary act of loyalty, took Mark and sailed to his home region of Cyprus to continue the ministry there. So, I want you to see something there. So, second missionary journey, Paul says, no bueno, this isn't going to happen. If we're taking John Mark, I'm going my way, you're going yours. Barnabas says, so be it. But then I want you to notice what Barnabas does. He takes him back to his home country. He goes back to the place where he has the most influence. And though he's proven to have wimped out the previous go-around, he takes him to the place where people know him best, where he has the most to lose, and says, Mark, John Mark, I'm going to take you to my home country. I'm going to rebuild you. That was a risk for Barnabas. Because if that guy had messed up again, now he's discredited Barnabas' reputation among his own people. And so what I'm going to say to you is that a mentor in your life needs to be willing to risk something that's valuable to them through an investment in you. The decision by Barnabas is really a cornerstone principle for every Christian leader. The courage to remain with the one who has blown it. We live in a results-driven world, and even within ministry, failures often met with dismissal. My last job, oof. A lot of times I had a legal responsibility to dismiss people. So I would have to be the one to sit in front of them saying, listen, it's been reported to me, it's come to my knowledge that you have committed some grave moral error. Do I have to be more specific than that? Okay. Could be sexual, could be money, could be false doctrine, could be fraud. Those really all those things and more. And you have to say, listen, I'm sorry, but I've got to take your ministry from you. There was a particular instance where I had to remove someone who was way better known than me, way more influential than me. Like their picture had graced the covers of Christian magazines. They were like a really big deal. And I'm superintendent, and between I received a petition with 1,500 to 2,000 signatures that said this person should be removed from the ministry. And they're an icon. I mean, an icon. And so I did the investigation. I can't tell you all the things that I learned, but there was a common thread of abuse, spiritual abuse. There's common threads of lots of accusations of sexual impropriety, something I couldn't conclusively prove. But in the course of this, in the investigation, we had to sit in a room, and I was here, and I had 4 or 5 leaders around me, and we had to pepper this person with questions. They had to answer, and some of them were so embarrassing to have to even ask. And I get to the very end, and I called this person by name and said, do you ever remember speaking at CBC? Central Bible College, not Catalyst. And I've spoken there many times. I said, well, you remember speaking there in 1992, 1993? And it's been a long time. No, I don't. I said, well, in that particular service, you talked about Balaam's donkey. And you brought up Dr. Forrest Arnold, who was a 6'6" professor that gave up being drafted in the NBA in the 60s, late 50s, early 60s, to go into the ministry. If you ever heard of your basketball, and you ever heard of Oscar Robertson, he and Oscar Robertson were the same. They were going to be drafted like 1 and 2 that year. Oscar Robertson, number 1, and number 2. And he's this big man. And you brought Forrest Arnold up on the platform, and you put a donkey head, this like a mascot, or you know what I'm saying, and it strapped around his chin. And it's like this donkey thing. It's like his donkey ears and his donkey nose and snap. And you talked about how that God could use anybody if he could use Balaam's donkey. And oh my goodness, I do remember that message. Well, how did you know that? I said, I was a student there. I was sitting up in the balcony. And if you had told me in 1993 that now being in my mid to late 40s, I'd have to sit in front of you and take away your ministerial credentials, I would have probably said, no thanks. I can't do that, Lord. This is the great, whatever their name is. I said, but even though I have to do it, I'm going to walk with you. And I'm not going to embarrass you. And I'm going to try to protect your honor. But You're going to have to leave the pulpit for a period of time, and you're going to have to go to counseling for the next specified amount of time. So, usually in the church, when you bring correction, I just want you to know this. As a pastor, you just get accustomed that if I correct somebody, I'm just basically saying goodbye to them, because nobody endures correction. Like, you try to correct church people, unless they really are sold out to God and really sold out to the church that you pastor, here's their response: bye. I'll go to another church where I can do what I want to do. And as leaders, we do the same thing. And this person called me pastor, said, "Pastor, don't worry about it. I've been preaching accountability for 50 years. Now it's time I live it." Thought that was an awesome statement. And what I'm saying to you is, sometimes we have to get beyond the fear of correcting someone, even if we run the risk of losing relationship with them. But if we do it in the right spirit, who knows that God might give them an open heart to receive it, and they will feel affirmed and loved and supported like no time in their life. So to go further, I do. I protect this person's honor and walk with them. And when we began to move to California, we just moved to California, and this person sent me, and it's in my office. When you guys come by, I'll show it to you sometime. I can't show you the name on it because they put their name on a little plaque on it. But they sent me like the sands of the hourglass. You know what I'm talking about? Okay, so the old, like, you hear it, all the sand falls down to the bottom like a timer. They sent me that and said, "Thank you for," I'm getting this wrong, but it's close. "Thank you for walking me in all the moments of my life when I needed it most." Correction. This person's in their 70s. I was in my 40s at the time. Correction. God wants us to be able to receive correction, and as leaders, you've got to be able to give correction, and to have the courage to remain with the one who blows it, and protect them and love them and try to restore them. Because all of us at some point in time are going to blow it. Some in big ways, some in small ways. Barnabas looked beyond the single act of desertion and saw the potential in John Mark. He understood that character is often forged not in success, but in the process of recovering from failure. So we've got to make investments in people. And let me say this: your investments always have to exceed your withdrawals. Because if you're always riding somebody, stop it, wrong, shame, and you're not depositing in them, you bankrupt the account. What happens when you bankrupt the account? You bounce a check. When you bounce a check in a relationship's over. People can only take so much. So they've got to know, and that's a way for you to judge people in your life. If they're making investments in you, and they know that they love you, and they're teaching you and helping you and all those, then when they come to say something to you, that can be trusted. Here's something I've tried to demonstrate to staff throughout the years. I've always said that public correction is always appropriate when there's private loyalty. Private correction is always viable when there's public loyalty. So, for example, in the context of like the team here, I often say, we win. When we win, we win. But when we lose, I lose. I'm never going to throw you under the bus. Now, I may get onto you within the context of the team, but when it comes to the church at large, when it comes to the board, when it comes to other people who judge us, buck stops with me. I messed up. And when you do that, and someone sees you take a bullet for them in public, they pull you aside and say, "Hey, nitwit, Nimrod, what's wrong with you? Why did you do that? Man, dude, step it up. You got to get better. That was dumb." Yeah, they can accept it. Now, but if you get them in public and you embarrass them and you say, "Hey, Nimrod," in front of 10 or 12 people, they're not a mentor to have in your life. So the outcome of this patient, grace-filled investment is one of the great turnarounds in the New Testament. The same John Mark, who once fled from the work, later became a trusted companion to Apostle Peter, and most significantly, the author of the Gospel of Mark. And here's the cool kicker. Paul himself, years later, writing in prison from Rome, says in 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 11, get John Mark, and bring him with you, for he is very useful to me in ministry. The guy who was the nitwit now became the guy that in Paul's darkest hour says, man, could you bring him? I need him. There's something, I see something in him that I need. I need this. I need that relationship. And this is really a kind of just a process of redemption. It's a great story. It reminds us that our assessment of a person should never be based on their worst moment. We're all going to have a bad moment, but we can't judge somebody forever by their worst moment. People can and do change. With patient guidance, a safe place to fail, and a mentor who believes in them, a discouraged and defeated young believer can be restored to become a pillar of the church. So now I want to talk to you about my own life and then give you 4 keys. So you want to start with good mentor or bad mentor first? Bad? Oh, maybe I like the way you think. So I'm in a friendship with a guy who had grown up around me. We had been in Bible college studying together, weren't friends in college, but became close friends later in ministry. And he had received an invitation to go and to see this guy who was a megachurch pastor. The church there, the megachurch pastor said it ran 5,000. It really ran about 1,800. But anyway, I just shared that with you to say, okay, you're already getting a feel for the complicated nature of this person. So, man, Mark, we need to go down there. I think we could really learn from this guy. And I thought, oh, man, cool. I'd love to go. So we fly to see this person. And very quickly, for coming, he says, I've given you my time. And here's a missionary friend of his. I'm going to expect all of you guys to send him a check for $1,500. Got it? Okay. For me, I was grateful, and I'm a missions giver. So at the time, I didn't think anything about it. I thought, well, sure, But, like, I would kind of like to have known that on the front end, but I took it. It's okay. Man, I got to spend time with this guy. And so I get back, and from that initial trip, and this guy starts calling me. I'm like, this guy's taking time to call me. And so a call once a month turned into a call twice a month. The current call turned into a call once a week, and sometimes then later on multiple times a week, and starts inviting me to things he's got going on. But every time that I did, there was always this $1,500 or sometimes $5,000 or sometimes. And then later in life, so we're fast forwarding now, 15 years or so. I'm trying to get a loan for our church to build a building in Georgia. And he finds out about it and says, hey, will you loan us? Yes. Have you thought about so-and-so company? No. I said, they're good. Yeah, they're really fair. He said, in fact, let me call them for you. I'll get you the loan. Okay, cool. So we go through the process. We're reviewing the paperwork at the board meeting. And they're looking down on what's called the settlement statement. And there's these fees that are there. And they said, what's this fee here of $50,000? Who's it for? So, man, I wish I could tell you this part. The way this person labeled their ministry, there's an AG ministry that sort of sounds like it. Okay. Gosh, I wish I could tell you. the initials of his name. My kids know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The initials of his name.
Uh-huh.
There's a ministry in Assemblies of God.
That's
Yeah.
so sketchy. I didn't know that part of the story.
So the people on board said, so are we making a $50,000 donation to this? It is at home missions. I said, no, that's not home missions. That's going to this person. He never told me.
I understand.
He pocketed $50K.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you labeled it.
Yeah. So I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed. I later confronted. So I'm just giving this. I'm kind of going in different portions of the relationship. So then there's this money thing. I'm pastoring in Charlotte, North Carolina. This person has encouraged me to go to Georgia. And in the middle of considering going to Georgia, I get a call from what was my dream church in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. And they called me right as I'm about to go to Georgia. And the church in Georgia was 300 people, mostly older folks. The church in Broken Arrow was 1,500 people. And the compensation, the pay package in Broken Arrow was 4.5 times larger. So take what Georgia was giving me and multiply times 4.5. And so they called me. And so all I knew to do was call my mentor. So I called and said, hey, I know you encouraged me to go to Georgia, but Broken Arrow just called. Oh, you're not ready for that. No, that'll eat you alive. No. You just need to keep your eyes on Georgia. You'll be the hero in Georgia. There, you'll flame out. You'll be successful. Okay, well, I respect your judgment. Click. 2 weeks later, he's interviewing with that church in Oklahoma. He tells me later, oh, no, I didn't know anything about that. They called me afterwards. They called me after you said no. He ended up saying no too. His wife wouldn't let him go. So I go to Georgia and we're in the same district together, the same state. And my influence starts rising in the district. And he was never the elected leader, but he was kind of like the godfather in the shadows. Like whatever happened, he was always kind of directing behind the scenes. And so I got elected serving on the same board that he was. And we're headed for a showdown for the assistant superintendent's role. And I thought, man, if he wants that, he'll get it, no problem. That day, lo and behold, on the first ballot, I jumped out to this like huge lead. Like I've got like 100 votes, he's got like 30. And I'm like, ugh. Now all the way up to this election, he's trashing me. Honestly, words getting back to me from everywhere. He's discrediting me. He's kind of implying accusations about me, all this stuff. Okay. And so 2 ballots later, I'm elected. And I am stunned. So there was a kid in our ministry there who had gone to the bathroom after the vote. I don't mean to be impolite, but he's in a stall, okay? And so while he's there in the stall, he hears voices in the bathroom of this mentor of mine who said that I cheated and manipulated in order to win the vote. I was encouraging that young man who was in the stall to go to this person's ministry school, to their own version of Catalyst. And that young man came later to me and said, there is no way I will go there after what I heard him say about you. This young man later went on to North Central. And so Reagan's, she's having trouble putting stuff together. It must be pregnancy.
Well, because I'm like, who are you talking about? But I'm like, oh, no, going on.
So I'm having to place these things in so let's keep her up to speed here.
Sorry, guys.
So needless to say, it was a hurtful relationship. Then I get elected superintendent. He gets elected to be my assistant superintendent. And so in that moment, now the tables have turned, and I'm holding on cards, but I'm distraught because I'm thinking, oh my goodness, how will this work? I mean, I just don't. And so I literally, I was in Columbus, Georgia when I got elected. I went back to the pool or went to the hotel. Reagan and Gretchen were taking naps. I went to the pool and in a chair, knelt in the chair by the pool. Nobody was there. And just said, God, what do I do? And the Lord spoke to me and said, you're going to love him. You're going to honor him. And you're going to give him the choice to lead whatever he wants in the district. But it can only be one thing. I said, I can't do that. He'll take the thing I want the most. The thing that's my baby. He'll do that just to do it. And I said, and the Lord said, call it. I was still in my spirit, like call him, like sense of urgency. I can't. And I looked at my phone and it's him. He's calling. Yeah. And so I go, hello? And he goes, so how are we going to do this? And I said, well, interesting you should ask. I said, I just came out of prayer and I just want you to know that I'm going to honor you and I'm going to respect you and you're going to be publicly and privately loved by me. And I want you to take whatever you want and I want you to champion it. But you're a busy guy. You can only have one thing. But whatever you want, it's yours. Take a week to pray about it, whatever you choose to do. I will let you take the ball and run with it. And I'll make sure that you have the money to do it and the support from me, publicly and privately. Well, okay. So he calls back and 2 weeks later chose the very thing that I didn't want. The very thing that I hoped he would choose. God worked it out. So I say this complicated story to say there are times when mentors become your tormentor. And I should have, in wisdom, saw through it from the very beginning. Like I tell the story, and I can see you guys going like, "Whoa, don't go any further, Pastor." Sorry, I already been there. Got all the scars to prove it. Because you're seeing through it. Well, now hindsight's 2020. I see through it too. And so, but even these moments when the tables turn, you can never sink to the bottom. You have to be the one to continue to provide the character, the integrity, the being above board that God requires of you and not allow those things to turn into vindictive moments. And here's the positive one. I'm going to give you 4 keys and we're done. What time is it, guys?
10.
Okay, great. So the next one, I will call his name. I grew up in Oklahoma, and growing up in Oklahoma in the Assemblies of God there, we had a superintendent there who was like Jesus Jr. Okay. Everybody thought he like walked on water. I mean, in my book, he did. And this guy, his name's Armin Newber, and he served for almost 20 years as superintendent and served on the national board of the Assemblies of God called the Executive Presbytery over the entire South Central region of the country. So he was a big deal. And had preached general councils in times past, and everybody knew who he was. He was tough. I mean, tough, but the most loving guy. I get my hugging from him. Okay. I'm serious. Because anytime I would be in Brother Newbern's presence and he hugged me, I just felt better than I did before the hug. He was a guy who always left me feeling better about myself, just having been in his presence. And so he's this icon. And so the weird thing about our story is that when he was 22 years old, now he's in heaven now. He was 40 years older than me. Okay. But at the age of 22, he pastored my home church, and I pastored my home church at age 22.
Mm.
He did it in the 50s. I did it in the 90s. Okay. And so we had this bond between us. The people that were the young married group when he was there were now the senior citizens when I was there, but they were still there. And we had all these people in common. His son was born while he pastored my home church. So we just had this click connection. And he was always a guy that just larger than life. I never wanted to bother him. I know he's really busy. A lot of times I would call him and our conversations were brief. And I was going through ministry, and I'd gone from my first church to my second church, and we were getting ready to build this big building, and I'd never done that before, and I was feeling a lot of pressure. And my mom called me one day, and she said, "Baby," still, and him too, "Baby, Mama's worried about you." I said, "Oh, Mom, don't be worried about me. Baby, you need a mentor in your life." I said, "Well, Mom, if I could just go out and get one, order one, I would have gotten it by now." I agree, but I mean, I'm going to be praying for that. I'm just going to pray. And will you pray with me too? I want you to pray that God will bring you a mentor in your life. And so about that same time frame, Brother Newbern had retired from office, and he had moved back to Tulsa. The office was in Oklahoma City. He moved back to Tulsa because he had pastored there many years, very respected. And I'm doing the funeral one day. And while doing the funeral at the graveside, he's standing over underneath the tree, and I get through with my part of it, and I go over there, and he puts his arm around me and hugs me, and he says, "Man," he said, "you boys from Sequoia County know how to preach," because he was from the same area, state. He's just being funny. And so once the final amens are said, he says, "Hey, listen, if you'd like me to come work for you, I think I'd be willing to work for you." I said, "What?" He says, yeah. I'm retired now. Why don't I just came on staff with you?" And I was like, "Are you serious?" And he's like, "Yeah." I said, "Well, we're really tight in the budget." "It's not about money." He says, I want to come serve. Tell me what you pay me." It wasn't much. It was embarrassing. But he took it. He comes to work. He said that he worked for me. I said, "No, he works with me." Okay, guys, that's a key point on how you treat your mentors. You don't work for me, you work with me. We worked with. I said, "You got one boss, her name is Joanne." That was his, and Jesus. So I was Joanne and Jesus. And so that's your boss, not me. So we worked with each other. And during that time, I was going through a really hard time in ministry, and was really beginning to first recognize my battle with anxiety and depression. And I would go in his office, and I would say, "Brother, I need to talk." I said, I'm so depressed. I'm dealing with anxiety." I said, "Can you help me?" He says, "Mark, I've never been depressed a day in my life." I was like, "Oh, I'm so defeated." He said, "Bud," he said, "I'm here for you, and I love you. And yeah, let's talk." And so he didn't get it. He didn't get it. He didn't understand. But he sat there and listened to me. And then he'd come over and he'd pray for me, and he'd cry. He always cried. And he was so special and so considerate that as a mentor, he wrote a handwritten card and sent a check for $25 at Hayden and Reagan's birthday every single year until he died. That's before he came to work with me and after we left. We spent 3.5 years together, and I left and went to Charlotte. There's probably a lot more to say about Brother Newman. I'm not sure that it's really helpful to the conversation. I hope you can see the difference between the two stories. You can compare and contrast those things. Brother Newman said to me toward my end of our ministry time together, he said, "Mark, would you be superintendent in Oklahoma?" Now, Oklahoma's a big district. It's like one of the biggest. Like, it's bigger in Southern California. And Georgia was not. It's a middle-sized district. And so say that out of his mouth, I'm like, he says, I see a superintendent in you. He says, if you will stay here, I will position you to become the next superintendent. So, Brother Newber, no, I could never. 3 years later, Brother Newber dies. I'm in Georgia. Time plays on. When it comes time for that season in my life, one of the things that gave me the most confidence was his words of saying, I see a superintendent in you. That's what a mentor does. They call out things in you that you don't see, that you can't even believe in yourself. And you trust the words, not because you believe about yourself, but because you know that they know what they're talking about and that they love you. Let me give you 4 keys, then we'll talk. Number 1, mentors come into your life because of the sovereignty of God, not human manipulation. So what I'm saying, that's directed toward you. You can't manipulate or try to make a mentoring relationship happen. It happens on the basis of relationship, and that relationship that forms is based upon God's sovereignty of directing that person into your life. Otherwise, it's not going to be a productive mentoring relationship. I think you see the difference in the 2 stories. I stayed in that first guy's life only as I was giving his payday, as long as I was supporting whatever he was supporting. But the moment that I began to rise into something that was equal to or greater than him, total decimation. He tried to destroy me. Number 2, mentors always seeks to leave deposits, not make withdrawals. Withdrawals will happen, but that's never their intent. They're always trying to invest in you. So number 1, mentors come into your life because of the sovereignty of God, not human manipulation. Number 2, mentors always seek to leave deposits, not make withdrawals. 3, mentors are those whose lives speak louder than their words. You just see it. They don't have to convince you of anything. They just walk it out. And then kind of rehashing a principle I shared with you earlier, number 4. Is everybody keeping up okay?
Yeah.
Mentors are people who earn the right to give private criticism because they've been publicly loyal. Mentors are people who earn the right to give private criticism because they have been publicly loyal. What are you going to talk about?
Here, I'll stop the recording so you can get a little bit more guarded in your responses.